I'm Neil Romanek. I'm editorial director of The Flint. The next panel is Endless Possibilities, a discussion on the flexibility and scalability of AVoIP or AVoIP. Is it AVoIP? Do we say AVoIP? We do. So this is going to be an audio-heavy panel, but also we're going to be getting into IP generally and the flexibility of it and the possibilities therein. So I'm going to ask the guys here to introduce themselves, and then we'll jump in. There'll be opportunity for Q&A towards the end. So start thinking, as you're listening to the conversation, start thinking about questions you might want to ask. There's some amazing expertise up here that you should avail yourself of. The sessions are being recorded, and they'll be available afterwards, probably within a very short time in the next week, that you can share with your friends. If you find this conversation amazing, which I hope you will, we hope you will share it widely. So, Ahmed, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Ahmed Shalabi. I am the technical design consulting engineer for Odonate. We develop a combination of hardware and software products and protocols that enable us to transport audio over a standard Ethernet network, now video products as well. I focus mainly on the technical design for our clients.
Hello, my name is Bill Ward. I am head of broadcasting at the Scottish Parliament, and as well as pooling all the output to broadcasters, we run all the conferencing and meeting facilities in the building, which is really where we have worked a lot with Dante.
Great. So we're going to talk a lot about IP here, but can we let's start with the audio, and you kind of gave us a little sketch there of what Audinate does, but can you talk about kind of what the technology around Audinate and specifically Dante and kind of what it is, assuming kind of people are coming to this from scratch. What is audio over IP and what is Dante and how does Audinate work in that?
Right, so we develop hardware products, so chips, for example, that packetize audio from its original form, uncompressed audio, and can transport it over a standard Ethernet network. So think of your standard enterprise network, and we use standard Ethernet protocols to transport that from one place to another. There is no need for any special hardware, and those chips are implemented in a number of manufactured products like Yamaha, like Blend Sound, like a number of manufactured products. We also develop software. Our embedded platform can be run on Linux-based products, and it does exactly the same thing. It transforms your hardware into a device that can be seen on a Dante network and can be transported from one place to another.
Great. So then, what does it do for you? Why over IP? What is the big deal about being able to transmit and move audio over IP versus not?
I think if I have to summarize it first, it's scalability and flexibility. So think of broadcast applications, touring applications, live production. You had to run huge numbers of cables, kilometers, miles and miles of cables to be able to transfer 64 channels or 256 channels, whatever you need. And now you just need one network cable, and you'll be able to transfer really the 256 channels or maybe even more, depends on the hardware you're using. It's just it's cost effective, it's easy to implement. I wouldn't call it plug and play, but it's much easier than running miles and miles of cabling. It's much safer too and easier to manage.
And is that where is it the standard now, or how ready are people to use IP as opposed to sort of sticking with the SDI and kind of what worked before.
Do you mean from an adoption perspective?
Yeah. Are people waiting to build a whole new facility, or are people?
I think it happens with every type of technology when you moved from the analog days to digital, and the move to IP is the same. A lot of people will struggle, and a lot of people will try to hold on to what they know, but it is the future. You can't fight evolution. That's my opinion. I think if it provides flexibility and scalability, and that's the way to go.
And if I'm moving to IP, or I'm kind of putting in an IP infrastructure, is there a big separation between audio and the video? Or is it, it's IP, I can move audio around there, I can move video around there. Do I need to be thinking about audio separately from that? And I think we're going to get some practical
from an interoperability perspective.
Pardon me, from
an interoperability perspective.
If I'm making that transition or upgrade, or I want to start working with in an IP framework rather than.
I think it depends on every environment. You can have a phased approach. I think the network hardware, and I think Bill and I were discussing this earlier. I think once the network hardware is more cost effective, more democratized, people will find this easier to migrate from their legacy based systems into IP based systems. I think it's just going to be a phased approach. Once it's more cost effective, more democratized, it will be easier. And I think, again, to touch upon another point, I think the skill set has shifted drastically. So from having to have video and audio experience, you need to have network experience as well to be able to manage and understand those systems and be able to effectively deploy them, design them, and support them.
So Bill, and I think that kind of brings us to you, because we were just talking about kind of this kind of really wide experience that you've had in media and broadcast and technology. And so you've probably seen a lot of different types of implementations before coming to the Scottish Parliament. And then can you talk us about maybe what your job is there, maybe in some detail, and kind of what the needs are at the Parliament, and then maybe talk us through the IP implementation there.
So clearly what we have to do is facilitate the meetings of Parliament, whether it's in the main chamber or in committees, and pull all that to the domestic and international broadcasters. That's it in its simplest form. We have 6 committee rooms and the main debating chamber. And what we found was that we were due to, pre-COVID, we were due to replace the existing consoles. Every desk in the chamber has its own electronic console with its own microphone, card reader, and voting functions at each desk. And then our operators control the microphones on cue from the chair of the meeting or the presiding officer. Now, pre-COVID, we came out with a plan that we wanted to replace the consoles with like-for-like consoles, nothing bespoke, get a commercial off-the-shelf product, wire it in, very simple, keep it very simple. And then COVID came, which really blew everything up. For one thing, the market stopped, everyone stopped producing and all the rest of it, but of course, we then had to create hybrid working in a mad rush and allow members to work at home and combining that with working in the chamber. And so there's a big workflow change. Now what we also did was we surveyed members about their experience, about what it was like to sit in the chamber for 4 or 5 hours during a session. And the problem we face in there is the members are sitting in there debating, and so you've got 1 or 2 people speaking at once, and then 120 of them shouting as loudly as they can to try and stop them actually saying what they're trying to say. But we did a survey, and unanimously the survey came back, and they did not appreciate the audio quality. They found it difficult to hear what was going on in the chamber. And I think what we'd done is we'd concentrated hard on getting the sound pressure levels even within the chamber, and there was a good level in the chamber. What we found was that intelligibility was low, and we brought acousticians in to look at the fabric of the chamber, how the system worked, and they said, there is a problem with intelligibility. It's not the level, it's just that the fact that there are multiple different delays going on in the chamber, there's reflection from the room, and because each loudspeaker is not delayed, members were hearing, multiple different sound sources at the same time. And their recommendation was to have effectively a near-field monitor in each desk that was delayed to which microphone was on at a time. Now, if you have one microphone and multiple loudspeakers, that's relatively simple to set your delay from that one microphone, right? So each speaker has its own delay, but from one microphone reference point. What we had was 131 microphones, right, and 172 listening points. So what we had to do is to find a way in which we could make that work, right? So how can you have 131 delays in 172 listening points? Which, when you start thinking your question around copper, it's thinking, right, if you're going to try and do this with copper, it would be impossible. It really would be impossible. The amount of cabling and the amount of processing, the amount of racks of delays you'd have to have. And we work with companies. We work with a consultant from a company called Wave Science and Glensound, who are here, and a systems integrator called Squared Paper. And we conceived the system where if we ran Dante to every single desk, and every single listening point has its own Glensound box powered by Dante. Now, in this very, very clever Glensound box, and it has to be said that the Glensound stuff is phenomenally clever. What it does is the loudspeaker then knows which microphone is on in the chamber and then has its own corresponding delay compared to which microphone is on at the time. It also has a microphone point, a loudspeaker monitoring point, serial port, and also primary and secondary Dante network in each box, and also a small power amp powering a loudspeaker, and all this within a box that's about the size of a big box of matches. And I'm not advocating Dante products here. I'm not trying to sell Dante or Glensound products, but it was a very clever box. So each desk or each loudspeaker has its own unit. Coupled to that, the next phase is going to be, we'll have the microphone points and the request to speak and voting points will be on consoles, which will, again, the data will flow through the same Dante network. So the Dante network is carrying the audio to the loudspeakers, is carrying all the microphones and all the data from card readers and push button controls on each panel in this Dante network. It's not without its cabling. He did say, he did talk about cable. Sorry, you mentioned cabling. We did put in, I think, 6.5 kilometers of cable, of data cable, to make our own network in the chamber. But this stuff just would not be, it'd be inconceivable in an analog. But the really complicated bit in this is that what we found was, okay, if you're following that principle about one microphone on and every one of the 172 listening points sets its own delay for that one microphone. The trouble is, we have quite a lot of instances where the presiding officer will turn on her own microphone. So you've got two microphones on, so we need two reference points for the audio. So the next phase will be to introduce 4 buses in this audio network. So you can have 4 microphones on at any one time, and each one of the listening points will know which microphone is on and then make their own delay for which microphone speaks at which time. So again, the processing in this is pretty phenomenal. right? So you've got 172 times 4 times 131 delays in the system. So again, and this is the kind of stuff that just would be, that's Dante makes this possible, right? Dante makes it scalable. So that's our Dante application at the moment.
Amazing. So then, how does that also? So that's the communications inside the Parliament, and then how does that also affect the broadcasts going out?
So the audio from the microphones is then mixed with ambient. We have ambient mics in the chamber as well by our sound supervisor, and that is presented to pull to broadcasters. So Dante doesn't sit within the broadcast chain at the moment. It's really within the acquisition chain.
And then there's a feed that's going out to the.
We then pull everything to domestic broadcasters and webcast. Interestingly, traditionally all the broadcasters used to take, through the SDI feed in the building, used to take the feeds from SDI within the building. Now we're finding the broadcasters, because we stream in 1080i, the broadcasters are now starting to take the webcast actually as their source. So rather than taking the SDI, they're now taking the stream. So that's the first kind of move into using online distribution for broadcasters, but that's not our primary route. Our primary route's still within the building.
Is it also? Were there any other kind of IP upgrades that you were doing, or was it just around the?
So, building is 25-year-old next year. Throughout that period, we've changed. We've changed to digital. It was analog when we first got in there. So there have been progressions over the years. Everything's become HD. Everything, but it's still run on SDI. So all our baseband is SDI. It's an interesting question. You're asking about the evolution of IP. At IBC this year, it was interesting going around and seeing that actually it does seem as though the writing is on the wall for big bits of broadcast hardware. And some of the big manufacturers who made lots of big broadcasting boxes are moving very rapidly into software-based products. And the big, some of the big suppliers, I won't mention names, but big suppliers are obviously struggling with the hardware model. So I think it's inevitable that people are working to software, much more to software. It's much more scalable. It's much more flexible. I think that the Pro AV market is becoming much more prevalent in broadcasting. I won't mention names again because I think there are people here that are definitely, in the forward advance of that. But there will come a point that people will have to start moving into the IP domain, whether it's 2110 or NDI. It's inevitable because there'll be less and less hardware available. And I think that's an interesting point about how you evolve from SDI into 2110 or NDI, because it will happen. It's not an if. You won't be able to stick to analog. Yeah. And I would struggle to think about ways in which you could really have an analog data network that's completely separate to, it has to become digital within existing workflows. It has to become digital anyway. But yeah, I think I can't put time on it, but I don't know, 5 years. It's probably not that far off. I think that you're going to see everyone having to really start migrating.
5 years, is that, you think, Ahmed? Or?
I can't put a number on it, but it eventually has to happen.
Yes.
It's not sustainable
the faster,
the way
the
it
better
is.
for you guys.
Sorry?
So the faster, the better for you guys. Yeah.
We already exist in a number of manufacturer products. From an audio perspective, the technology is quite mature in the market. I think for us, going into video is the kind of challenge we're focusing on right now. But from an adoption perspective, I think eventually we'll see all this phased out. All the big hardware will be phased out. And the move to cloud obviously will accelerate this much faster because it's more cost effective, it's easier to manage, and it offloads all that processing and all that hardware maintenance to cloud.
And then allows sort of flexibility, and as you obviously were saying, and COVID is an interesting thing you brought up, and many of the transition stories you hear are COVID stories. You know, we had to make decisions really fast about how we're going to do things. Like this week, we have to change our whole business. And IP was a big tool that allowed people to make those changes. Did you when people were scrambling, kind of in early 2020, was that a big time for you, or did you have a lot of people calling you, going, "Help, you know, can you?"
I think honestly we were focusing on chip shortage at that time.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So at that time we were focusing on delivering to our equipment manufacturers. We were trying to deliver the technology because chip shortages were a big thing. But I think again it's just COVID accelerated the inevitable. The move was going to happen anyway. It's just whether it was in 5 or 10 years. Now it's in a much shorter period. People are used to networks in everywhere. People are used to that kind of workflow. I think it was just faster. That's all.
Well, I have, at The Flint, as I said earlier, I introduced myself. I'm editor at The Flint. The Flint focuses on sustainability in the media industry. And so those kinds of tools are really interesting from a sustainability point of view. There's a number of things, and it'd be great if you could sort of maybe talk a bit about that. But one of the things is flexibility and being able to, you know, in the coming years, probably very few years, we're going to have to make a lot of changes, or at least be prepared to be very flexible and make changes. I wondered if you had any thoughts about kind of sustainability and kind of some of the obviously IP, you know, reduces weight and waste and copper at the most basic level.
Yeah. Going back to COVID, I think it was a catalyst. I think most of what happened was inevitable, and it just what would have been a long process and taken an awful lot of taking people with you and training and winning over hearts and minds and going through procurement and all these kind of things, you know, which would have traditionally taken, you know, 2 years of slog, had to be done within a week, and so it was extraordinary. I mean, it was absolutely extraordinary, that leap, and also the leap from what had been seen as sort of the broadcast standard, right? There was this gold-plated broadcast standard, largely, you know, guarded and protected and created by the BBC over a long period of time, and then suddenly it just didn't matter. You know, that absolutely just went, right? And the whole thing was, how are we going to, you know, for the Parliament, how is the Parliament going to meet? How are people going to make decisions, pass legislation? And you know, this legislation was pretty crucial. COVID legislation is like, how do we have these meetings? How does the First Minister communicate to the public? You know, it was pretty fundamental stuff. And the weird thing was, it was completely seat of your pants stuff, and making it up as you went along, and seeing how a broadcast went, and then sort of saying, well, okay. Okay, most of that was all right. Rather than testing everything, rehearsing. You know, I remember the first time we did the very first party leaders debate, and I'd committed to having a party leaders debate 2 weeks after lockdown. I had no idea how we were going to do it, and it literally the Tuesday night before the Wednesday live, I still didn't know. I used vMix in the end, but my home broadband was so bad I couldn't use a vMix vCall, so then I had to find some remote machines to install the vMix on Wednesday morning, and this was going live on BBC One at 1 o'clock. And I remember putting my own telly on a mantelpiece as the off-air, and then cutting on the thing, and then suddenly at 1:15 thinking, shit, the postman's going to come and the dog's going to go mad, you know. So it's like, and then cutting it, and then there's this real surreal moment for anybody who was doing this at home, is the fact you are suddenly cutting live telly that's going on multiple channels in your living room. It was so weird. But our team was an absolutely fantastic team at trying out new things, about trying out new ways of working, because of course, as well as the technology, we had to work with all the clerks and train the politicians and do test runs with politicians, make sure that they were comfortable with how it was going to run. The parliamentary procedures had to be rewritten. We had to work with legal teams to make sure that they were legal. We had to create new voting systems. It was a vast amount of work. And then it all happened, and then it grew from there. In sustainability terms, so the Scottish Parliament's been very good at keeping the hybrid working going. What we said was it's an iterative process. This is going to change and it's going to develop, and it won't be everything from the get-go. But stay with us, give us your feedback, and we'll keep changing. We'll keep making improvements. And the Parliament's committed to keep hybrid working, and it is. I mean, it's still very active, particularly for committees where non-politicians are coming in to give evidence. And previously, you'd be bringing in members of the public or interested parties to come into the Parliament. You'd sit there at the end of a table, coming into the Parliament. You had to come to Edinburgh. You sit there intimidated as hell. I've sat in committees, and it is quite intimidating. But now, of course, you can do it from your kitchen, right? And that's become really normal to do that. And it doesn't matter that it wasn't, that the picture quality sometimes varies and all the rest of it. It doesn't actually matter. It's all around content. Now, so the Parliament's stayed committed to it. I think there are some interesting points on sustainability. One is the fact that at the moment we're going software. Software is great. We're not having big pieces of kit. At the moment, software takes a lot of processing. So actually, heat is still an issue because I can't remember, we've got about 40 PCs run to keep our business going in committees, right? All those PCs have to sit somewhere, they're all making heat. So, it isn't a golden bullet for sustainability. Yes, it does keep people away, and so people don't have to travel, people don't have to have accommodation in Edinburgh. There is a win there. But also, interestingly, when we're talking about cloud-based working, we can't magic away the remote working and the remote server centres that are going to have to pick up this level of processing, right? Now, some elements are saying you have to calculate the carbon footprint of an email. I kind of personally think that's going to take more heat than actually the email will have created in the first place. But we do have to think around remote processing and the environmental impact. Just because you're not processing in your own building doesn't mean that there's not a big server center in China somewhere that's actually doing that processing for you. And I think we do need to think around that. But I think on the whole, the sustainability thing, certainly around the travel, has made a significant difference. But I think for the Parliament, the big win has been for witnesses and being able to have better public participation where you're not intimidating the hell out of everybody that comes into the building.
Great, amazing. That seems like there's something in that technology, a lot of the technology now enabling you to make changes faster than you could have 10 years ago, and that you don't necessarily have to be in the sort of same change in the same time frame that you had to be 5 years ago. Interestingly,
that one of the major problems we had with hybrid working, to start off with, was that we used a video conference platform called Blue Jeans that some people will be aware of, and we would send out the links to all the members, and then they come in and they would follow the debate, and you'd have 50 members online, and you'd have 50 members in the chamber. And the problem we found was that the members at home couldn't intervene. So if a member in the chamber was standing up speaking and the member at home wanted to intervene on them, they couldn't do that, right? So it quickly became suboptimal experience to be working away from base. So what we did with Squared Paper is create a system now where the members at home, it's now on a Zoom platform, but they click up their hands up, they put a hands up on their Zoom call, and then their name and picture comes up on the screens automatically in the debating chamber. So the member who is speaking in the debating chamber suddenly sees the fact that that Bill Ward is requesting to intervene on you, and then it's up to that member about whether they take the intervention or not, and vice versa. So if a member is remoting in, if a member on the floor wishes to intervene on them, they stand up, and again, the member at home will get the notification that somebody wants to intervene. So it made the debate very dynamic, and that's the relationship of debates. Debates have to be dynamic, and they have to be two-way.
Is latency an issue there? Because if you're having that debate,
No,
you don't want an awkward pause between every exchange.
Well, again, another feature we put in was we put a mic on, a simple thing, putting a graphic on for the home user saying mic on, because what that does is they will sit there, they'll wait for their mic on light to come on, and then they speak. There's a little bit of latency there, but it stops that. Am I on? Am I on? Is that me? Is that me? So they know straight away that's their cue to start speaking. But actually, in the debate, no, there's very, very little latency. We've had to do adjustments for the lip sync for the video onto the monitors in the chamber. There are lip sync issues there, and of course that varies just because of the vagaries of the video conference platform. But actually, in committees, it is a pretty fluid conversation, and now everyone is used to it. Yeah, so everyone is used to having Teams meetings and how they work, and actually it's very fluid, and everyone is very used to it.
Questions from you guys? I'm going to come down there with the mic, so hold on one second.
Make it simple, Gareth.
And if you can introduce yourself as well.
Hi, I'm Gareth Gordon from QTV. I was just wondering, just in the context of exactly what you're talking about, do you have plans to look at using the video over IP that Audinator have released for those screens so you can control the delay that you just mentioned?
At the moment, not. So at the moment, the system integrates. So we have a ROS carbonite in the backbone of the video conference platform, because the way the video conference platforms works, we've actually got 6 Zoom calls. So any member, and the members are pre-assigned to one of those 6 calls. They don't know, but they have their own individual security. They have their own secure link with their own name in it, and they come into one of their 6 Zoom calls. And then the ROS carbonite then effectively cuts which one of those 6, and then does the graphics and all that kind of stuff. That then goes into the vision mixer, and the gallery director still has control over cutting the source. So they'll use one of the 8 robotics or the VC input, and they cut it live.
I'm Patrick Quinn from Glasgow Caledonian University. It's actually not quite a question, it's more a request actually to Ahmed. I teach using Dante in our courses and teach the technology of it, not just the using of it, and your training materials are really good, but what causes us a problem is you don't want to sell us site licenses for Dante Via, so it's a product request, a site license please, it would make my life so much easier.
I will submit a feature request.
This is your chance. Yep.
Hi, I'm Aaron from STV. I was wondering, with the trend towards software-based operations, do you think that takes away from the kind of tactile experience as an operator, where they'd prefer like buttons and pushing buttons and knobs to kind of operate the systems?
It can, but it's up to you. There are a lot of configurable buttons that you can use as rather than soft keys. I think there is always. It's funny because we're actually putting some of those in. So funnily, on the on the top, on the dais where the presiding officer sits, there are various mic controls that are all on software at the moment on the user interface, and we're actually going to do exactly that. We're going to put buttons in, so there are some hard buttons, but there are lots of options to do that with just soft keys, and you assign the keys to buttons. That's relatively simple to do. And they have nice things with like illuminated. Sorry, there are some. I can't remember the manufacturer, but I saw one manufacturer that's got miniature screens on each button, so you can actually, as well as just labeling it up, you can actually put video into each button, so you can actually see what you're cutting as well. And so one of the uses is we have a sort of timer function that the clerks will have, and the clerk that will put the stopwatch into the buttons, so they can clearly see. It makes it multifunction. Sorry, that doesn't mean much, but yeah, very easy to put tactile buttons in.
But I wonder won't most productions be like, nah, you get your screen, that's all you're going to get, you'll be fine?
I think from us, to make it work, right, you have to really, really understand, because all of our people are not technicians, right? And at every single stage, when we've done this technology, we've said, right, it has to make things better, and it has to really work for the end user. And I sort of coined the phrase of everything has to be Fisher Price, the toy manufacturer, because it has to work, it has to be robust, it has to be simple, right? So the user really shouldn't be thinking about technology, right? Because that's not their job. We think about the technology. The MSPs have got enough to think about, in fairness. They don't really need to be thinking about technology and thinking about, will the technology work, how does it work? They should just press a button and it should work, right? And if it doesn't, and if they have to think about it, I think that's a problem. That's a failing on our part, that we haven't made it simple enough that people don't. It's not because these people are clever people. The members are very, very astute, clever people, but they just don't need to think about technology. That is our job, right? They just need to have something that works every time, that is robust, and that's the whole Fisher Price thing.
Yeah, I love that Fisher Price. I need to Fisher Price my office, basically. But having that, I guess that being able to have the flexibility and power available to you, but simplicity, it would seem to be a real kind of balancing act.
So, yeah, that's it's interesting because the other thing is, the system we put in. I've often thought, have we over-engineered this? Is it just far too complicated? And in the new system, when we have the new microphone consoles built into the desks, there are 8 sets of processors that sit between the microphone, right, and the loudspeaker. 8 sets of processors. That's before you even get into the broadcast chain, right? That's just within the chamber. And you have to think, is that right? But if it works, what we have produced is something that works really, really well. It's very, very robust. And that nobody needs to think it has 8 sets of processors in it, apart from Hanif and I. But it's provide the scalability. It's provide a really good product that does what we need it to do. So you're using technology, you make it simple, but it is the end user. The end user, you have to constantly think about their experience and the user experience.
Who else? Come on, that really stupid question you want to ask. Somebody else probably wants to ask that same question. Nobody? Okay. I'm getting back up here. It's your last chance. Okay. So how are we doing here? We've got a couple minutes. Anything you want to conclude with, Ahmed? What's up next from Audinate, and what should we be looking forward to?
Well, I think for us next, we're focusing on our latest solution, Dante Connect, which enables you to transfer audio between different regions in the cloud. That's what we're focusing on, and we recently moved into video for a couple of years now, and this is what we've focused on lately.
And Bill, and are other people looking at what you've done, and are you getting calls about?
Yes, I mean, we work quite closely with the UK Parliament in London and Northern Ireland, chatting to Dublin. There's quite a lot of, there's quite a lot of parliaments thinking about how we work, and we all kind of learn bits off each other.
Are you the first in the UK to do this the way you've done it, or is it? Yeah.
Westminster got something similar, but not quite at the same scale. The complexity of ours is significantly bigger than anyone else.
Amazing. Well, if there are no more questions, please join me in giving a round of applause to our guests.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if you want to continue the conversation, you can meet over here close to the Black Magic stand. And thanks very much, guys.
Thank you.